The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields when Sarah first saw him. A thin figure stumbled through the golden stalks, his dark hair matted with sweat and dirt, his clothes torn and blood-stained. She'd been gathering eggs from the hen house when she spotted him collapse near the old oak tree that marked the edge of her family's land. Any sensible farm girl would have run straight to her father. The year was 1847, and tensions between the settlers and the Lakota had been rising like storm clouds on the horizon. But something in the way the boy lay there, so still and vulnerable, made Sarah's heart ache with a compassion she couldn't ignore. She glanced back at the farmhouse where smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, would be finishing his morning coffee, preparing for another day of back-breaking work on their modest homestead. Her younger brother, James, would be getting ready for school. Neither of them would understand what she was about to do. Sarah set down her basket of eggs and hurried to the well. She drew up a bucket of cool water and grabbed a loaf of bread. From the kitchen windowsill, where it had been cooling, her hands trembled as she made her way through the wheat field, her heart pounding with each step. The boy couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17 years old. His face, peaceful, in unconsciousness, bore the high cheekbones and bronze skin of the Lakota people. A deep gash across his shoulder had bled through his buckskin shirt. His lips were cracked from thirst. Sarah knelt beside him and gently lifted his head, dripping water between his parched lips. "Please," she whispered, not knowing if he could hear her. "Please be all right." His eyes fluttered open, dark as a midnight sky. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence. Sarah saw no hatred there. No violence, only pain and confusion, and something else that made her breath catch. Gratitude. "Water," he whispered in accented English, and Sarah helped him drink more slowly this time. She tore the bread into small pieces and offered them to him. His hands shook as he ate, and tears of relief rolled down his dusty cheeks. Sarah found herself crying too, though she couldn't say exactly why. "Thank you," he said when he had eaten his fill. "I am Running Wolf. I owe you my life." "I'm Sarah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah Mitchell. You don't owe me anything." But even as she said the words, Sarah knew they weren't true. Something had passed between them in that moment, something invisible but powerful as the wind that swept across the prairie. A connection that would change both their lives forever. Running Wolf struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "I must go. Your people find me here." "You're hurt?" Sarah protested. "You need proper care for that wound." "And you need to be safe," Running Wolf replied, his dark eyes holding hers. "If I am found here, it will bring trouble to your family." He was right, and they both knew it. But as Sarah watched him struggle to his feet, every instinct in her body screamed against letting him go. She had never felt this way before, this desperate need to protect someone, to heal them, to keep them close. "Will I see you again?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Running Wolf paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't read. "If the spirits will it," he said softly. Then he melted back into the wheat field like a shadow, leaving Sarah alone. With her racing heart and the empty basket of eggs, that night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom. She could still see Running Wolf's face, still feel the warmth of his hand when she had helped him drink. Her practical mind told her she was being foolish. He was Lakota. She was a settler's daughter. Their worlds were not meant to touch. But her heart whispered something different. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Sarah went about her morning chores mechanically, her thoughts still tangled up in memories of dark eyes and gentle hands. She was hanging laundry on the line when her brother James came running from the fields, his face white with terror. "Sarah." "Papa," he screamed. "Come quick, they're coming." Sarah's blood turned to ice water in her veins. On the ridge overlooking their small valley, silhouetted against the stormy sky, sat 300 Lakota warriors on horseback. Even from a distance, their war paint was visible, their weapons gleaming in the dim morning light. Thomas Mitchell burst from the house, his rifle in his hands. Other settlers emerged from their homes, forming a frightened cluster in the center of their small community. Women clutched their children, Men checked their ammunition with shaking hands. "Why are they just sitting there?" whispered Mrs. Henderson. "The preacher's wife. Waiting," Thomas replied grimly. "The question is, for what?" Sarah's eyes searched the line of warriors desperately, looking for one face among the many. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she spotted him running wolf. Sitting tall on a painted pony, a eagle feather in his black hair. Even at this distance, she could feel his gaze on her. "I have to go to them," she said suddenly. "Sarah, no." Her father grabbed her arm. "Ah! Have you lost your mind?" I think I know what this is about." Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. "I helped someone, a boy who was hurt and hungry. Gave him food and water." The color drained from Thomas Mitchell's face. "You helped one of them? Sarah, what have you done?" "What was right," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her conviction. What Ma would have done. The mention of her mother dead these 3 years from fever seemed to take the fight out of Thomas. Sarah pulled free from his grasp and began walking toward the ridge, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "Sarah, come back!" James cried, but she didn't stop. The climb up the ridge felt like the longest walk of her life. With each step, the warriors became more distinct, their faces painted for war, their horses stamping impatiently. Sarah's legs shook, but she forced herself to keep moving. When she was 20 yards away, the warriors parted like a curtain, creating a path straight to their leader. He was an older man, his face weathered by sun and wind, his hair gray at the temples. Sacred symbols were painted on his chest. His eyes held the wisdom of many seasons. But it was Running Wolf who spoke first. "Father," he said in his own language, then switched to English for Sarah's benefit. "This is the one I told you about, the farm girl who saved my life." The chief studied Sarah with eyes like winter storms. "You are brave to come here alone, white girl, or perhaps foolish." "Maybe both," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I had to know why you're here." "My son was wounded in a hunting accident," the chief explained. "He was lost, starving, near death when you found him and showed him kindness. This is a debt of honor." Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean ... you're not here to attack us?" "Running?" Wolf urged his horse forward until he was close enough that Sarah could see the healing wound on his shoulder. Now properly bandaged with traditional medicines, "We are here to offer protection," he said softly. "Winter is coming, and there are war parties from other tribes who do not distinguish between those who show kindness and those who do not. My father offers the friendship of our people to yours." Relief that flooded through Sarah was so intense she nearly collapsed. But there was something else. Something in Running Wolf's eyes that made her pulse quicken all over again. "I hoped I would see you again," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "And I hope the same," Running Wolf replied, his voice rough with emotion. The chief looked between his son and the young white woman, understanding dawning in his ancient eyes. "There is more to this story than kindness to a stranger," he said slowly. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't look away from Running Wolf's gaze. "Yes," she admitted. "There is." What followed was the most unlikely negotiation in the history of the frontier. Two peoples who had been enemies for generations, brought together by the compassion of a farm girl and the honor of a warrior. The chief, whose name was Stone Bear, proposed a winter alliance. His people would protect the small settlement from raiders in exchange for supplies and medical aid when needed. But as the formal agreements were discussed, Sarah found herself drawn into quiet conversations with Running Wolf. They would walk along the creek that bordered her family's land, talking about everything and nothing. Where at Pent, he told her about his people's ways, their connection to the land and the spirits that moved through all living things. She shared stories of her childhood, her dreams of seeing the ocean someday, her love of books and learning. "In my tribe," Running Wolf said one evening, as they sat by the water, "we believe that the spirits sometimes bring two souls together across great divides. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary." Sarah's heart skipped. Necessary. For what? To teach us that love is stronger than fear. understanding can bridge any gap. He reached out and touched her hand, his fingers warm against her skin. I think the spirits brought us together, Sarah Mitchell. My father will never approve, Sarah whispered, though she didn't pull her hand away. My people may not understand. Either, Running Wolf admitted. But some things are worth fighting for. As winter deepened, the unusual alliance held strong. The Lakota warriors kept their word, driving off 3 separate raiding parties that might have destroyed the settlement. In return, the settlers shared food and medicine, and slowly, tentatively, began to see their protectors as people rather than enemies. But Sarah and Running Wolf's growing love remained a secret, hidden in stolen moments and whispered conversations. They met by the old oak tree where she had first found him, sharing dreams and fears under the vast prairie sky. I love you, Running Wolf told her one snowy evening, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. I know it's impossible, but I love you more than my own life. It's not impossible, Sarah said fiercely, though tears froze on her cheeks as she spoke. Love is never impossible. But spring brought new challenges. As the snow melted and the first green shoots appeared in the wheat fields, other Lakota bands began to question Stone Bear's alliance with the whites. Young warriors spoke of betrayal, of their chief growing soft in his old age. The crisis came when a cavalry unit arrived at the settlement. Having heard rumors of an Indian camp nearby, Captain Morrison, a hard man with cold eyes, demanded to know why the settlers hadn't reported the hostiles. They're not hostiles, Thomas Mitchell tried to explain. They've been protecting us all winter. Indians are Indians, Morrison replied curtly. I have orders to remove them from this territory by any means necessary. Sarah felt her world crumbling around her. She found Running Wolf by their oak tree that night, his face grim in the moonlight. My father says we must leave, he told her. The soldiers will attack if we stay. Then I'll come with you, Sarah said, without hesitation. Running Wolf took her hands in his touch gentle, despite his warrior's calluses. You would leave everything, your family, your people, your world. You are my world, Sarah replied, and she meant every word. But Running Wolf shook his head, pain etched in every line of his face. I cannot ask that of you. To live as an outcast among my people, to never see your family again, ... No, my love. I will not destroy your life for the sake of my heart, so you'll just leave? Sarah's voice broke. You'll leave me here to marry some farmer and pretend I never knew what real love felt like? If I stay, they will kill me, Running Wolf said simply. And probably you as well. I have seen what happens when love crosses the lines your people have drawn. It ends in blood and sorrow. They held each other under the oak tree as dawn broke over the prairie, both knowing it might be for the last time. Sarah memorized everything. About that moment, the feel of his arms around her, sound of his heartbeat, the way the morning light caught in his dark hair. Promise me something, she whispered. Anything. Promise me you'll remember this love, even when you're old and gray. Promise me you'll tell your children about the farm girl who would have followed you to the ends of the earth. Promise. Running Wolf said, his voice thick with unshed tears. And you must promise me the same. Find happiness, Sarah. Live a full life. But remember that somewhere under this same sky, a warrior will love you until his dying breath. The Lakota departed that morning in a long, solemn procession. Sarah stood in the wheat field and watched until the last horse disappeared over the horizon, heartbreaking with every hoofbeat that carried Running Wolf further away. Captain Morrison and his soldiers left the next day, satisfied that the Indian problem had been resolved. Life in the settlement returned to normal, but Sarah felt like a ghost walking through her own existence. She went through the motions of daily life, helping with the farm work, attending church, smiling when expected to smile. But inside, she was dying by degrees. Months passed. A young farmer named Benjamin Taylor began courting Sarah with her father's approval. He was kind and hard-working, everything a practical woman should want in a husband. But when he kissed her hand at church, Sarah felt nothing but emptiness. You need to let go of whatever's troubling you, her father said one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Now, Ben's a good man. He'll take care of you. I know, Papa, Sarah replied, but her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where Running Wolf had disappeared, Your ma used to say that sometimes love comes gentle as a summer breeze, and sometimes it comes wild as a prairie storm, Thomas continued. But it always comes to those who keep their hearts open. Sarah looked at her father in surprise. It was the most he'd ever said about matters of the heart. The question is, Thomas added quietly, what kind of love are you waiting for? That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about her father's words. Had she been waiting for love to come gently, safely, in the form of a suitable husband? Or was she waiting for the storm that had already passed through her life, leaving devastation in its wake? The answer came with the morning light. Sarah rose before dawn and saddled her horse, leaving a note for her family that simply said, I have to find my own way. She rode north, following the path the Lakota had taken, driven by a force she couldn't name and didn't question. For 3 days she traveled, sleeping under the stars, living on hardtack and creek water. On the 4th day she crested a hill and saw smoke rising from a valley below. The Lakota camp was smaller than she had expected, maybe 50 lodges scattered along a stream. Sarah's heart pounded as she rode down the slope, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the bravest decision she'd ever made. The warriors who rode out to meet her recognized her immediately. Without a word, they escorted her to the center of the camp where Stone Bear sat outside his lodge, his weathered face unreadable. You are far from home, farm girl, he said in English. I'm exactly where I need to be, Sarah replied. Surprised by the steadiness of her own voice, Stone Bear studied her for a long moment. My son is not here. Sarah's heart sank. Where is he? He has gone on a vision quest, so for 2 moons now. He has been in the sacred places, seeking guidance from the spirits. The old chief's eyes softened slightly. He has been troubled since we left your lands. Please, Sarah said, sliding down from her horse. I know I have no right to be here. I know your people have no reason to trust me. But I love your son, and I believe he loves me if there's any way. You would give up your people for him? Stone Bear asked. Live as one of us, follow our ways, raise Lakota children. I would learn your ways, Sarah said. I would try to be worthy of the life you'd offer me. I can't go back to pretending I'm someone I'm not. Stone Bear nodded slowly. There is wisdom in your words, young woman, but the choice is not mine. Alone to make. Sit. We will wait for my son's return. The waiting was the hardest thing Sarah had ever done. Days stretched into weeks as she lived among the Lakota, learning their language, their customs, their way of seeing the world. Some of the women were kind to her, teaching her to tan hides and gather medicinal plants. Others viewed her with suspicion, whispering about the white woman who had come to steal away one of their warriors. Sarah didn't blame them for their doubt. She was an outsider, an interloper in their world. But every sunrise that passed without Running Wolf's return made her more determined to prove herself worthy of the chance it'd given her. On a morning when the leaves were just beginning to turn gold, a scout rode into camp with news that Running Wolf was returning from his vision quest. Sarah's hands shook as she helped prepare the welcome feast. Her heart racing with anticipation and terror in equal measure, she saw him before he saw her. He rode into camp at sunset, his face gaunt from fasting, his eyes holding the distant look of one who has walked between worlds. Sarah stood at the edge of the crowd, hardly daring to breathe, when Running Wolf's gaze finally found her. He stopped his horse so suddenly that the animal reared. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, they stared at each other across the camp. Then Running Wolf dismounted and walked toward her, moving like a man in a dream. Are you real? He whispered when he reached her, his hands hovering inches from her face, as if afraid she might disappear. As real as your love for me, Sarah replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. Running Wolf said, finally touching her face with trembling fingers. The spirits showed me a path I thought was impossible, a way for 2 hearts to become one despite the divisions between our peoples. He looked over at his father, who nodded gravely. The spirits have spoken clearly, Stone Bear announced to the gathered tribe. They have sent us this woman to show us that love can bridge any divide, that understanding between peoples begins with understanding between hearts. Not everyone in the tribe was happy with the spirit's message. Some of the young warriors grumbled about accepting a white woman into their band. A few of the older women questioned whether Sarah would truly be able to adapt to their ways. But as autumn deepened into winter, Sarah proved herself again and again. She learned to speak Lakota fluently, mastering not just the words, but the subtle meanings behind them. She showed skill in traditional crafts, making beautiful beadwork and quill work that earned the admiration of even her harshest critics. More importantly, she showed the same compassion that had first drawn running Wolf to her. When children in the camp fell ill, Sarah sat up all night caring for them. When an old woman's lodge was damaged in a storm, Sarah was among the first to help repair it. She has a good heart. The tribal medicine woman, Singing Bird, told Stone Bear one evening, spirits chose well. The wedding took place on the first day of spring, conducted according to ancient Lakota tradition, under the same vast sky that had witnessed their first meeting. Sarah wore a dress of white buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork, a gift from the women of the tribe who had come to accept her as one of their own, as she and Running Wolf exchanged vows, promising to walk together through all the seasons of life. Sarah thought about the impossible journey that had brought them to this moment. A simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love that defied every boundary society had tried to impose. The spirits work in mysterious ways, Stone Bear said as he blessed their union. Sometimes they bring together what seems impossible to teach us that nothing is truly impossible when hearts are open and love is pure. Years passed, and Sarah became known throughout the region as the white woman who had found her place among the Lakota. She bore 3 children with Running Wolf, 2 sons, and a daughter, each one a living bridge between 2 worlds. When tensions between settlers and native peoples flared again, as they inevitably did, Sarah often served as a translator and peacemaker. Her unique position allowed her to speak to both sides with understanding and compassion. She would tell frightened settlers, "They're not so different from us. They love their children, they mourn their dead, they hope for better days, just like we do." And to her Lakota family, she would say, "Not all white people are the same. Some are driven by fear and greed, yes, but others are just trying to build good lives for their families, same as you." Her work helped prevent several conflicts that might have ended in bloodshed. Government officials sought her counsel. Tribal leaders respected her wisdom. She became a living symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over hatred. But perhaps her greatest achievement was the love she shared with Running Wolf. Even after decades of marriage, they could still be found walking by the creek in the evenings, talking and laughing like young lovers. Their children grew up seeing what true partnership looked like, what it meant to love someone, not in spite of your differences, but because of them. "Tell us the story again, Mama," their daughter, Star That Dances, would beg on winter nights. When the family gathered around the fire, and Sarah would tell it the story of a farm girl who shared bread with a starving boy and discovered that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the world. She would tell of the 300 warriors who came, not for war but for peace, of a love that refused to be conquered by prejudice or fear. Remember, she would always end the story, "Love is not about finding someone who is just like you. Love is about finding someone whose differences make you more than you ever thought you could be." Running Wolf would nod and add, "And remember that the spirits have a plan for each of us. Sometimes that plan asks us to be brave in ways we never imagined. But if we trust in love, if we keep our hearts open to what seems impossible, miracles can happen." As Sarah grew older, she often thought about the life she might have lived if she had chosen safety over love. She might have married Benjamin Taylor, raised conventional children, lived a comfortable but unremarkable life as a farmer's wife. Instead, she had chosen the storm over the gentle breeze, and it had carried her to shores she never could have imagined. She had found not just love, but purpose. Not just happiness, but meaning. On quiet evenings, she would sit with Running Wolf on the hill, overlooking their camp, watching their grandchildren play in the fading light. The old oak tree where she had first found him was visible in the distance, a landmark of their beginning. "Do you ever regret it?" Running Wolf asked her once, his hair now silver with age. "Regret what?" Sarah replied, genuinely puzzled. "Leaving your world for mine? Giving up the life you were meant to have?" Sarah looked at her husband of 40 years, at the life they had built together, at the children and grandchildren who carried the best of both worlds in their hearts. She thought of all the people their love had touched, all the conflicts they had helped prevent, all the bridges they had built between divided peoples. "This is the life I was meant to have," she said simply. "Every step, every choice, every moment of doubt and fear, it all led me here to you, to this love that has become bigger than both of us." Running Wolf smiled and took her weathered hand in his. "The spirits knew what they were doing when they guided you to share your bread with a starving boy." "Yes," Sarah agreed, watching the sunset paint the prairie sky in shades of gold and rose. "I think they did." Their love story became legend among both peoples, told and retold around countless campfires and kitchen tables. It became a reminder that, in a world often divided by fear and misunderstanding, love could still triumph. That a single act of compassion could ripple outward like stones thrown into still water, creating waves that reached shores far beyond what the thrower could ever imagine. And somewhere under the endless western sky, where the wind still whispers secrets to those who know how to listen, their love continues to inspire those brave enough to believe that some divides are meant to be crossed. Some rules are meant to be broken, and some loves are worth risking everything to find in the end. That's what Sarah Mitchell learned from a starving boy who became the love of her life, that the greatest adventures begin not with grand gestures or elaborate plans, but with simple kindness offered to a stranger in need. And sometimes, if we're very brave and very lucky, that kindness comes back to us, transformed into something more beautiful than we ever dared to dream.